Hello everyone, in this episode we're going to break down the cinematography of Sicario, shot by Roger Deakins. My name is Matt Workman and you are watching Cinematography Database Show. So, Sicario, there wasn't a ton of B-roll for this movie, and that's fine because there's just a lot of visuals to go from. So this is going to be one of those episodes, kind of one of the first where I'm not relying a lot on B-roll. We're going to be just looking at the frames and talking about some of the higher level concepts and storytelling devices that are supported through lighting, framing, and all of that sort of thing. You'll also notice that if you're a longtime watcher of the show that I have relit my whatever we're calling this, my video. Normally I have a very soft light coming from this direction to make myself look presentable, I guess. But right now, in honor of Sicario, I've lit myself a little bit moodier. We've stopped the whole scene down. You'll see the outside of the window is a little bit more exposed. And then I've given myself this kind of like what I would call like a far key, and it's a very hard far key. And I'll let you guys guess what you think the light source is. What light did Matt Workman buy for his home videos, essentially? Maybe I've said it before, I'm not sure. You guys leave in the comments if you can guess what this is. So let's jump right into Sicario. Here we are. This is one of my favorite scenes, and it's like the first scene, and we're going to be talking about that quite a bit. So Ryan, Connor, AJ, Tom, Cole, Gabriel, and BD. BD, I think, wrote several times. Thanks for requesting Sicario. I actually watched it this morning, believe it or not. That was the first time I've seen it. I've seen a lot of B-roll about it. I know a good amount about it, but today was the day I watched it. So thanks, guys, for pushing me into that. Here is our slate. Not much to say here. 2 cameras, interesting. Shutter's 144, and I think this was an Alexa show. Though honestly, the format of the cameras, it's kind of irrelevant, especially for this kind of a breakdown, which is high level. So this is going to be a 6-part breakdown, and we will have a little bit of a tea break in the middle. So these frames are more or less going to go in sequential order. There will be spoilers. So if you haven't seen the movie or you don't want spoilers, then this is not the show for you. So here's the beginning when they're in the car. This is where we're first meeting our main character. Don't remember her name right now. And she's right here, and this is a pretty cool shot, and it has a lot of the elements that I talk about, that I spoke about in previous episodes, and those are silhouette. I would consider these windows practical lights, or they are objects in the scene that are emitting light, and I would basically consider those windows like that. It has depth, it has reflections, it has all sorts of stuff going on, and overall it's just a cool shot. You know, the focus plane is right on her. They're out of focus. There's clearly atmosphere in this scene, in this van or this truck, and we have the sun coming through, and it's a nice way to start it off. And what I want you to look at here, and we're going to zoom in on it in a second, is the lighting that's on her face. And this is something that I wish I had taken the time to illustrate in 3D, but we didn't have that time today, or I did not. So what we're looking at in this image here, I don't know the percentage, but what we're actually looking at on her face, the way that you get this type of look, and I've had a couple of people contact me about Dave Fincher lighting and who else? I would say Dave Fincher is probably one of the main directors that pushes for this, maybe Ridley a little bit, is that this is actually a reflection of a light source in her face. There's not a lot of direct lighting. Now, if you're using Cine Designer and you've started to get into what 3D lighting involves, you'll understand direct and reflected light much differently than people who only work in the real world, because we don't think about it that way in most cases. But I will tell you that this look is reflected light. This is like a reflection. If her face was completely chrome, a good amount of this, like 50%, maybe more of this, is reflection. And you can also tell that because look at her eyes. Her eyes are completely dark. There's almost no direct light hitting her. It's all reflected light. So this eye light, reflected. All of this in her skin here, that is the reflection of the skin. If her skin had a lot of makeup on it, in this case, you would not be seeing almost anything in her face because there's almost no direct light. That's all reflected light. So that's one of the ways you get this kind of a look. And if we do breakdowns of Fight Club, Gone Girl, those types of movies, fluorescents are a good way of getting reflected light in an artificial way. So I'll leave that at that. So here's one of the first scenes, really strong. And we come into this house. And there's 2 windows in the scene. There's one clearly coming from this side, so there's light coming from here. That's what's directly lighting him. And again, a lot of reflections, the reflections of the windows in his face and in the helmet. So this is like a reflection of the window. This is a strong reflection as well. Also on this as a reflection. There's a reflection of the window. And then what they've done for this scene, which is really clever and special, is that they put a red curtain over this. And this red curtain it basically acts like a gel. So it's casting light up here, and there's a reflection of it in his skin and his helmet. And as we go to the close-up, you'll see that red curtain is acting as, I might as well just do this, acting as a soft red key light in kind of a natural way. Like, why would there be red light in a suburban house like this with no neons or anything like that? This, I thought, was an incredibly beautiful and elegant way of solving that problem of adding colored light. And I wonder where in the creative process that came in. When were they like, we want to add red light for this scene? You know, there's red. It's one of maybe the first, I don't know if it's the first time. They kind of like imply that she's been on a lot of raids or this kind of work. But maybe it's one of the first times that she's killed somebody, you know, and this is kind of like a Shakespearean way of visualizing that, I would think. It's like there's blood on her face. It's like the red light hit her in the face. Very, is it Macbeth? The one where she like can't get her hands clean. It's been a while since I've read Shakespeare. But I feel like that's a good use of lighting, you know, honestly. Who would have thought? Roger Deakins, good use of lighting. Here's the scene after that. I think I forget when this is, but she's clearly having a reflective moment. And again, just really interesting filmmaking choices here where you would normally see her, you would see her reflection. It's completely obscured by fog. And I'm just so interested in what the conversation was like that you ended up doing that they ended up getting to this point where they were fogging it out. And I thought this is really interesting. So she's like trying to maybe redefine who she is. She's like looking in the mirror and she doesn't understand what's going on in her world, that she doesn't recognize herself. This scene is where she's getting recruited, and I want to talk about reflections and the use of implied space. So in this space here, everything is being lit overhead with fluorescence, and that's a very, it's a very, I talk about this a little bit. Fluorescents are a very like 90s and 2000s way of lighting like industrial spaces. I think we're moving towards LED and a lot more natural light these days. But if you went into like a very like bureaucratic organization, fluorescence for industrial design and architectural design, that was the way a lot of things were being lit. So we see these implied reflections of the fluorescence in the window, and we're shooting through at her, and it kind of works as a practical. We also see the fluorescence up here, and that's what this type of lighting is on her face. It's just fluorescence from straight down. And if you place them behind the character, they act as a backlight, and you might end up flagging them so they don't directly light her like on the top of her head. Again, more fluorescence here. Those are through the glass, so these are the actual fluorescents, and then that's a reflection of those fluorescents. And this, I believe, is a reflection of the other direction of the fluorescence in that room. So it adds a lot of depth to the scene in pure fluorescence. And then she looks like she's getting a little bit more of a mottled light, but again, it feels right to have the fluorescence in there. So people talking about, we want to eliminate reflections. There's something to be said about adding reflections on purpose and adding depth and adding, practicals. Practicals is one of those main things you're going to see in this movie and a lot of movies that help sell the lighting. And it tells a lot about the environment. Practicals are an opportunity. Reflections are an opportunity to tell more about the scene. Here's a wide shot just to help you understand it. Here there are some fluorescents in that room. There's some further back in the world. And then the glass, they're reflecting all over the place. Where's the camera in the scene? Where's the camera reflection? Maybe they painted it out. There's a good amount of visual effects in this movie, but we won't dwell on those. We'll kind of look at the high level visual effects or not. This is a kind of cool look at composition and how we use it to introduce characters. This is actually a shot where he's in the car in the car as it's moving. Or no, I think they get out of the car and he stays in it and operates. I'm pretty sure he's operating handhelds. Or maybe they're driving. It doesn't matter. He's inside the car, and we have a lot of in-car point of views. It's a very documentary approach to filming this type of thing. And he mentions this character over here, who turns out to be obviously very important to the story, but this is the first time we see him. So it's motion blurry. He's really little. He's blocked by this, and we can tell that they're looking at him. So we're introducing his character. Cool composition. He's really small in it. I think it's fun. Here, this is her looking at him. He's this direction. Not much to say. I just it sets up this shot. So again, he's facing away from us. This plane eventually occludes him as the camera moves. The plane goes in front of him. This wing's cutting it off. Just really fun composition. And it just kind of talks about how like kind of far away he is and how there's a barrier of this plane between her and him. That's what's going on with the composition here. Very strong use of that. This scene is very cool. Very big use of reflections, I would say. So this room has no lights on, and this is what it looks like when you walk into most scenes, daylight lit scenes in a room. So if you're like going to scout a location, you're like, okay, guys, turn off all the lights. It's going to look like this. And in this case, they're really banking on the fact that this floor is reflective, because you'll see like this here, 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 etc. These windows are essentially reflected in that, and it's lighting it for free. And then same with the ceiling. The ceiling is also reflective. So that's how this scene is so bright, even though there's basically no lights on it. It's just these 4 window banks lighting the whole scene. You know, the amount of direct light on anybody is very low. There's almost, you can barely see any direct light. It's all reflected light, and these columns as well are reflected light. So I thought this was a really cool scene. Probably gonna have to build it in 3D. Again, this light on him is mostly reflected light. It's not direct light. And I will do something a little bit more concrete on that, but that's the type of lighting you're seeing here. So if you're looking at this field, what is this? First of all, this is silhouette. He is essentially completely in silhouette except for the reflected light from the window, but they're allowing the light to hit the background. So we have the light hitting the background, but it's not hitting the people. And that's how you make a silhouette. That's one way to approach it. This is a very cinematic way of lighting. Most people, when they're beginning, would feel like, oh, I need to turn lights on in this scene. But you'll start to realize as you're going for these type of compositions, because lighting is composition in the end, that simple lighting from one direction will start to give you this type of effect where you have a strong silhouette and reflections if you choose. You could add a little bit more local direct lighting on him, but that's what's going on in this scene. Here's when they turn the lights on in the room. Again, these feel like, I would guess, like 4300 Kelvin fluorescence, that sort of thing. Don't flame me if you know exactly what's in there because you're on the Roger Deakins forum. I really don't care at all. So the fluorescents are on. They're a little bit warmer than the daylight coming through here. So the daylight would be like, look at that brush size. Would be 5600, and that's going to be white. So when you have fluorescents that are 4300, they're going to be warm. W is not, and why it didn't work out. But anyway, they're white balanced to daylight with some warm fluorescence in the room, and this is what it looks like. Kind of gross, but on purpose gross and realistic. Let's see. We are looking at a close-up of her with this. So we have the direct and reflective white window light, and then from kind of just like this overall ambient area, there's some warm light coming from the fluorescence, but I don't believe there's any fluorescent like directly above her. When it comes to composition, there's one thing I would just want to point out here is that repeated shapes is very strong. So if you come from a design background, you'll be aware of this. Repeated shapes, humans really latch onto that as far as structure. And then things that are reflective, this is likely a highlight from, I'd say, a fluorescent up here is making a very strong highlight. And out of focus, that turns into a bokeh. So those are some of the things going on here. Pretty standard right on the third composition, even for the eye line. But the lighting, it's pretty cool. This is the daylight mixed with the warm fluorescent banks. I like this a lot. The fluorescent banks with this white paint reflect into the ceiling, and as do these windows. He's getting a little warm fluorescent light. Very natural, like you would think that this would be kind of a disgusting, gross scene, but that's perhaps what they're setting up. But still, I think the Alexa or plus the coloring, whatever's happening here, it's just a cool look, and it's simple. It's like 12 or 16 fluorescent banks and windows. What's outside the windows pushing in, maybe it's like a 12K through diffusion through each one. It kind of doesn't matter. Or it could be natural daylight. I doubt it because you want consistency. You don't want the sun coming in and out on a movie like this. We are at part 3. And after part 3, we're going to take a tiny, tiny break, really short one. So here is an interrogation scene, again, lit with completely overhead fluorescence. And we're being introduced with the door opening, which is cool. It's like like that sort of effect. Really strong, works even on high-level movies. So inside this is kind of gross. It's hard to say if the walls are white and the fluorescents are warm and they kept the 5600 white balance, or if the walls actually are a little bit warm themselves. Doesn't really super matter. This whole scene, this white box, which is like the quote-unquote DP nightmare to light, is lit with 3 fluorescents overhead, and there's still depth in it. He still has a silhouette because he has dark hair. His body and chair occlude the light coming down, so these are in shadow down here. And same situation here. He is pretty much being backlit, even though this light's kind of in front of him. It's pretty much coming from the back. And the walls like that. And because of the back caps on these fluorescents, this back wall has kind of this feathering happening. Like up there's dark and then it gets brighter here. It's pretty cool. How do we make a simple scene still cinematic? This is an approach, and it's simple. Like you're like, oh, that makes so much sense. It's so simple to read. A lot of the times, the simple solution is the right one. A close-up with questionable things happening in this scene. He's turning off the camera there. Very cool. Out of focus action. Out of focus background action. Very strong for cinematography to communicate action and things happening very quickly. Not only are you communicating how angry he probably is at the guy he's about to do stuff to, we also are communicating that there's something happening in the background. He's turning that off because they don't want record of that. And again, the fluorescents, I guess maybe there's 6 in the room at this point. So it seems like they had these ones on, but perhaps had the other ones that are like up here off. And then maybe they left them all on here because we see that he is pretty top lit. His hair here and this nose shadow here. And then there must be one up here as well because that's kind of casting here. So that's the lighting for this scene. I thought it was really elegant despite trying to be kind of, off-putting. A similar tone here. All practicals, right? Like this is a industrial practical, another industrial practical, and they're all like this kind of, I'm not even going to try to guess like the type of light it is, but some sort of like chemical light, if that makes sense, like metal halide type light, and they're letting it go orange yellow. Hard to say what's color correct, what's not. But that's what's going on for this scene. This is one of my favorite scenes, honestly. So we have all these practicals going straight down, kind of like space lights, honestly. When you have this many lights from above, they basically all become space lights, and you have almost no shadow down here. You'll see that. Again, she is left in silhouette, entering a scene that is lit. Very strong technique. And all these reflective practicals add interest in the cars out of focus and in the buses in the background. Very cool. Here's a close-up, and we're going to talk about this lighting here on her. Keep the practicals in the background. Actually backlight with her. I'm not sure. That might be a fake backlight, but look how subtle it is. Look how the color matches these practicals. It just really ties her in. And to keep her from being completely an orange-green mess, I actually have a BTS still, basically 4x8 beadboards with what I would guess are like, 2K open faces bouncing into it, adding a little bit of white light back in the scene. That's what the white light is here. So you can kind of imagine that those 4x8 beadboards that I showed before are essentially like up here off screen with a 2K going into it like this. Boom, boom, from a high angle. It's a pretty high angle. You can almost see the reflection of it in her forehead here. And on her nose is a reflection of it. Her cheek has a little bit of reflection of it. Those are the reflected key. You'll see that she's wearing more makeup here. She's not as shiny like in the beginning. Less reflected light, more diffuse light. The opposite of that. Wait, no, that was exactly right. More diffuse light, less reflected light because she's wearing makeup. And here's a scene. Again, you can kind of sense that this eye light is like a beadboard over here. Again, with the 2K going into it like this. That's his eye light. And that's also giving you both the reflection, because that looks like very reflected light. Same with his shadow on his nose. But this other half tone here, that's a bit of direct light, of course. But there's a lot of reflected light. He's being backlit by the orange practicals as well. Pretty cool. Some bokeh. This is, again, I love this shot. This is like one of my favorite shots. This is a lot of reflected light again. Like this is a reflection. A little bit of reflected light in here. There's a bit of the Fresnel effect happening here, the eye light, so you can tell because of that eye light that there's a light over here. Likely the beadboard, again with the light here bouncing up, boom, like that. And it's very far side of her face, kind of like that. Well, no, see, I have a lot of cheek shadow happening. She does not have much of the Rembrandt patch happening, but very cool. I think it's as simple as bouncing a 2K into a 4K beadboard, 4K? 4x8 beadboard, and placing it correctly and just keeping with the tone. Matching this tone to what's being talked about in this scene. The scene's very dark, but they're talking about dark things, right? So that is wrapping it up for part 3, and part 4, 5, and 6, we're going to get on with the rest of the movie. Going semi-chronological, we're going to take a quick tea break. Got that right here. You guys feeling this dark lighting? I think it's kind of dark. I don't know. I need more lights. I should go buy some lights and do some fun lighting for these. I think this. I kind of had fun lighting this up for a second. Okay, Sicario. So what I want to talk about in the break is my podcast. For people that don't know that I have a podcast, it's called Modern Cinematographer. And if you go to cinematographydb.com, under podcast, you will see we are on, as of recording this, what is this, episode, I didn't number it, episode 16. I do it weekly. Every Wednesday this comes out, and I interview different people. Sometimes it's a DP, did a couple colorists, couple equipment manufacturers, sometimes just me talking about stuff. And that stuff is what I call the subtitle for the podcast. So the name of the podcast is Modern Cinematographer. The subtitle is the podcast dedicated to the business behind cinematography. So less about the techniques of how you light, what the cameras do, that sort of thing. More about what is it like to actually be a cinematographer? What is the business like? Dig into agents, we talk about being freelance, some of the hard things about being freelance, that sort of thing. I think podcasts are really good for that. And I interview other people about that. And we've been digging in deep about some of that real life stuff of being a freelance cinematographer. And it applies to directors and other people in the film industry as well. If you go to iTunes, which is what I suggest you subscribe onto, so grab your phone. It's on Stitcher too or whatever. You can go to iTunes, Stitcher, subscribe to Modern Cinematographer. Give it at least I would say listen to the latest episode. I interview someone who just went to USC for cinematography, and we talk about what he learned and what he did right out of school. It's kind of valuable, I think, if you're considering going to film school or if you just graduated and you're in the same boat. I think it's nice to know what are other people doing, and I'm going to interview people that went to Tisch, Full Sail, AFI, all the schools. So if you're in that part of your life, this might be interesting. And I find it interesting now to see how well they are educated in certain areas and then not in others, moving into the actual industry and trying to get jobs and work. So that's it for the tea break for this one. Check out Modern Cinematography if you're into podcasts for cinematography. Every week, every Wednesday. This show is, of course, on Monday. So here we are back in the podcast. By podcast, I mean Photoshop. So this scene is really interesting. Makes me uncomfortable even going into this scene. But this is where she's just gone through some stuff, and she's like, her partner takes her out to have a break. And this establishing shot's really cool. Let's grab a color like this. We got some orange, yellowy fluorescence happening here. Or maybe the sign is yellow and these are just white. I think they're yellow fluorescence. Yellow fluorescent. Then these kind of like, I would guess white Christmassy light things. And the wall is orange. So they're making these nice little pools of light. A little practical back here to show that there's a little bit of depth. That practical is reflected in the water. This sky, which he talks about, Roger Deakins says that they just got really lucky in I forget where they shot this, in New Mexico or something like that. And they just got these beautiful skies. So I don't know if these are Compton or not, but the sky is reflected in the water. Very pretty. Car is angled to reflect the sky as well. That fluorescent is reflected in here. This red is what, from this or something? I'm not sure. You see the TV inside. We see this blue fluorescence contrasted against the orange fluorescence, a fluorescent in the deep background. Beautiful stuff going on. Simple. Simply by adding fluorescence and practicals into a twilight scene, we get amazing results. And again, this is twilight, so this is just, the sun is basically down, but it's still reflecting into the sky, and we have this very nice blue light just coming down from the sky from all directions and reflecting into things. And here's the difference between diffuse and reflective. That same light coming down, hitting the floor, which is diffuse, it's not shiny, looks like that. It's almost black, almost completely gone. But as it's reflected into the windows and that sort of thing, it's a little bit brighter. So that's a little bit there to help you start to understand the difference between diffuse direct lighting and reflected lighting. Not something that every DP really starts to get into until you get into tabletop, where it becomes your number one obsession is reflected lighting. We're inside here, and a little bit of purple. I would guess a purple Kino flow overhead, that sort of thing, because it's casting something like this, like a purple Kino flow overhead. It's casting this downlight on her. You see it on her nose, her forehead. And then from here, I would guess either an LED or, again, just a hyper blue Kino flow from behind camera, doing this front push of blue that's on everybody. And yeah, there's this kind of like pink fluorescent, pinkish purple fluorescent. You can see it in his, reflected in his hand, reflected light into his ear. There's not a lot of direct pink lighting. It's a lot of reflected pink lighting. And then the orange in the background. Pretty fun scene to light and looks nice. This feels very Hollywood. This is like the most Hollywood scene in the whole movie, but I guess it's allowed because it's like a bar and there's a lot of like, man-made lights happening back here. Pretty cool. Definitely like a very straw, warm light coming from this direction. You can sense that this is the reflection. Let me grab a. This is again the reflection of the light, and then this stuff over here is the direct lighting from that light source. So by knowing that this is about that size in her reflection, you know that this is a big light source over here. Pretty big. Also, the soft shadows are giveaway, but the size of the specular highlight's not the exact right word, but we can go with it because I think a lot of people like to use that. Looking at the length of this reflection, especially in her cheek, we know that it's a fairly large light source because the light is going like this. It's coming from the camera, which is me, and then going like this, and then bouncing off. If it's bouncing up all the way from this direction, it means that the light source is big enough to reflect in there. If this light source was only this big, the reflection would probably be smaller. So these are the things that you start to pick up on. Lighting skin, lighting faces, the reflective light in their face, just as important as the direct. So you'll see on my face right now, I'll tell you right now, if you guys are guessing what this light source is, it's about 1 foot tall and about 3 inches wide, the aperture of the light source. Not a very big reflection happening in my face, a lot of direct lighting. So that's kind of like the name of this episode is direct versus reflected lighting. Here's the reverse of that shot. We can see in his head here, this is a reflected blue light from something back there. He's getting, actually, there's a lot of reflected too, but he's getting a good amount of direct light. And you can see some eye light. You can see the reflection of that orange source over here in his eye. Fun scene to light. Here's that blue look. Oh, so maybe this is what the blue lighting was. Maybe it wasn't fluorescence. It seems like there's some sort of bluish source up here, whatever this is. Whatever those practicals are pushing down a blue light like this. And then under the bar, like uplighting these glasses is probably like another, like, if I grab a color, like, like blue Kino flows, like under the bar. So it's just all mushing together and doing a big blue push, that sort of thing. We don't like that guy, of course, if you've seen the movie. Looking at her is this her apartment or is this, I don't know, I think this is her apartment. Over here we have, basically this scene is being lit by fluorescent overhead lights. So like a fluorescent bank like this is putting in light and it's putting out light like this. And this shadow is from this wall here, this wall piece, and it's coming into the room and it's adding green light, greenish blue light. This practical is pretty central. You'll see it in a lot of scenes. It's pushing down light like this, you'll see. I actually just read something because I'm building a lot of sets in 3D for Cinema Designer right now. I've read up on the standard heights in America for these sconces. This stuff is very standardized. How tall the ceiling is, how far a sconce goes down, how far a table is. I'm actually writing a plugin called Set Designer that's going to kind of like automate this process for you. So I've been doing a lot of research into like, what are the standard cabinet sizes, what are the standard practical sconce sizes, that sort of thing. It's actually pretty formulaic when you're going to design this stuff. I mean, you can tweak whatever you want, but there's not as much like decision making as you would think. There's a lot of standards here. This practical, again, is casting light like this. So we essentially have 3 light sources. We have this green one pushing from this direction. We have this more or less white source pushing light like that. And then we have this one over here also pushing light like this, if that makes sense. And I guess, to be fair, that green light's kind of coming down from this direction. So those are the main sources here. Again, no front lighting on the people. Letting them go silhouette, very, very strong. It's all about body language and physical acting here, though there's a lot of audio happening as well. And let's see, the things I'm going to call out as we wrap out of this, I like this shot a lot, is there's reflections in this lamp, makes it strong. And then these chairs this is reflected warm light from the back wall. That's the reflection off the wall. And then same with this. These very flat reflections are reflections of this wall from the camera. Pretty cool. Here we are in that same kitchen. So the kitchen that's over here, we're now in the kitchen. Again, clearly a green fluorescent square bank like we kind of saw in The Office, pushing out light like this, letting it get raccoon eyes, keeping it real. When you let scenes get like this, it feels realistic, and you feel like you're not being lit. It's not being lit like a movie. Having a little bit of dynamic range to see in his eyes is always helpful. Maybe a little eye light if you're trying to keep it less gritty. True grit. True gritty. Here is, I think, what is this scene? Okay, so let's orient ourselves. So because of this practical and then this practical here, I know that we are in the room to the right of this scene. What's going on here? There we go. So that stuff's in the background now with this shears. Oh, so she's on the porch. She's on the balcony at night, and there's presumably a orange light coming from this direction. Very small specular. I say specular is the wrong word, but very small specular highlight coming from like a light source, like up here, like a one of these like industrial lights, like a scoop light with a bulb in it. It's just puking out orange, gross light. You can see the eye light here, which may be fake. It may be added on top of that. But this, of course, with the blue fluorescent light from the kitchen and the practicals out of focus, make this kind of an engaging scene. And the shears are very nice as well. And this is after the incident. And then here we are again with that same practical, holding it down in the background. It keeps you in that room. You know where you are. Light coming from the bathroom with a little bit of this green ambient. So you still see a little bit of this green light coming from the kitchen. Just keeps the tone all together. Also kind of sets up what happens in the end of the movie, this scene. And here's her after having kind of a bad day, kind of comforting herself by putting her hair up. Her hair length and my hair length are not that different. Mine's up already. Pretty cool. Interesting to not be able to see the camera here. The camera's like right there in the reflection. Again, there's just a fluorescent up here or something like that. Lighting this whole scene. You can see a diffuse reflection of it there. Diffuse reflection, I gotta clean this up. You see a glossy reflection there. So if we're in 3D, that would be a pretty glossy, like a 50%, 60% glossy reflection. Good stuff in this movie. And I enjoyed watching it as a story, and I also enjoyed breaking it down. So here we are at the end of the movie. I'm skipping one part for the end, which is, I think, one of the more powerful scenes and locations in the movie. Here we are, we get a little bit more desaturated, and we're completely out of that orange light situation. It's very desaturated blue or white happening here. Here's her through the curtain. And this movie, I was going to do a thing about highlighting it, but there's a lot of scenes where we're focusing on curtains, focus on the curtain, and then the rest of the scene's out of focus. And you're seeing like particles in the air and that sort of thing. So this is a throwback to that. And essentially when it becomes kind of like a visual motif that when the filmmakers show a curtain in focus and the scene out of focus, it kind of is foreshadowing that something's about to happen. If you go back and watch that, in at least 2 or 3 of the scenes, when you see the shot of a curtain, it's like, uh-oh, something's going on, something's going to happen. And that's definitely the case here. Very silhouette, just letting the sky be the primary light source. Coming through the room, there's a strong reflection in the table here. These are reflecting the kitchen light that's on. She's in silhouette. And definitely is setting up a story, or a question is, what is she looking at? What's going on here? We all know if you watch the movie. Here's the kitchen, again, with the fluorescence on. So there's some fluorescents up here that are green, maybe just 1, maybe 2, pushing out light like this. And that's how this scene's being lit from above, kind of like space lights. It's pretty much just pure ambient light. You don't really sense the shadows all that much. Very natural. And playing against that is this very silhouetted light here. And again, this is why this is so important and powerful, is that this lighting on his face is purely reflection, almost no direct light. This on his leg here, that's kind of direct light, maybe coming from here. But his hands, that ring, his nose, the side of his face, that is reflected light coming from the background to him, to the camera. That's not a great angle, but you get it. So that's what's happening here. That's how it's so side-lit and so moody. Similar here. This entire plane here of his face, like that, and you can see the reflection here, and largely this part of his nose here, that's reflected light. It's just reflected from the fact that there's light in this room. It's reflecting off the kitchen. So he's kind of lighting his face with the refrigerator or the stove. So he lit, the lighting's up in the air, hitting the stove, and that reflection from that in his skin is what's lighting this scene. And you get this kind of like reflective, shiny, silvery were like feeling from that lighting. And a lot of people ask me, I believe that's what they're asking me. They're like, what's that feel in the Dave Fincher movie? What's that feeling? How do they make the skin look like that? It's reflected light, and you have to go look for it. And you also have to have a little bit of reflection on the people's skin. You can't go to town with the makeup. When people are trying to, like, basically, if you did like what normal makeup people would do on like an interview, is like you just powdered him up, you wouldn't see anything. He'd kind of disappear because all that reflection would be gone. So that's largely what's happening in this scene. Very, very cool. It's literally like, how did they light the scene? They turned the fluorescence on in the kitchen and then angled him so that it would reflect into it. So if we can really be, I could do this in 3D. I'll do this in 3D at some point for you guys, and I'll prove this to you if you're doubting this. I can take in 3D from the camera point here, ray trace to you. What are we reflecting off of? It's probably something in the background, like almost like this wall back here is what's actually lighting his face. Lighting, I mean, there's a little bit of direct, but not much. Not as much as you would think. Again, here, because of the glancing angle and the Fresnel effect of skin, this you can see in his eye. His eye is like black, but it's the reflection of the wall, or maybe a fake. There might actually be a light source over here, like a bounce, but it's supposed to feel like the kitchen, So this is all a reflection in his skin. So that's that effect. And it doesn't cost money to do this. So go in your kitchen, if you have fluorescence, turn all the lights off, turn on the kitchen light, put someone in front of it like this, and try to find the reflection. Try to reflect that kitchen light back into your talent's face. That's how you get this. That's what's going on here. That's the phenomenon. Not every DP knows that either. Again, here, she's a little bit more open. So this has a lot more diffuse light on her. This is the reflection for her. This looks like she has a little bit of help from a light source, so it's not all from the kitchen. I believe I would say that the diffuse light coming from here, that's probably from the kitchen, but there's a little bit of a specular that seems like they added a light up here, like a little bit of a bounce, to give her a little bit of this nose shadow that's just a little bit more definition. So the problem is with this type of lighting is like if you let it go all ambient, if you let it go all super soft and bounce and reflection only, is you lose definition. So I think when you're starting your career, that's a terrible drawing. I'm going to turn that off because it looks scary. I'm scaring myself. Is that if you start to light with these big book light area lights only, is you lose definition. So the shadows become too soft and you're kind of like, I can't read that shape. A lot of your job as a cinematographer is to define the shapes of what's happening in the scene. Wow, this is a big technique actually, is to go for that big ambient push from a window with a book light or something like that. But then you have to key on top of that with a harder source. You have a big book light, like an 8x book light for a scene like this, something like that. But then you'd have a little bit of like a 1x1 light source, maybe even smaller, hitting them as well on top of it, a much lower light level, but it's going to give you more of a defined shadow. And I think something like that is happening here. So this brings us to our last section. Definitely spoilers for the movie. We're in Mexico at the corrupt officer's house. And this is one of the most powerful scenes. And I forgot to make layers, so you're just going to have to bear with me because I don't like to cut up these videos. Skip ahead about 10 to 5 seconds if you want to not see this. I'm going to have to re-put this back in there, but I'm human, and we're back. Okay, so here's one of those shots here, and there's this big fence going down. That fence looks like it was added in post. All of this. Horizon is about up here. And what I would say about this as I'm reading it, I might be reading it into it too much, but that's what I do, I guess, is that when you put the horizon up here, oh, interesting. So the horizon is up here. So what that typically means is that if there was a person like you, or there was a person right here, or this entire house, or this entire police car, which is, I didn't realize it was foreshadowing to the fact that he is a police officer. Or it's not foreshadowing, it's just telling you. When someone's below the horizon in film theory, which I learned a lot about film theory in school, is that they say that you're being oppressed by the world. When you put someone below the horizon, meaning your camera's high and you're looking down, is essentially how you get the horizon up in the frame. It means that everything is being below it is being oppressed. And that's not in every situation, but I definitely see that here. Versus if you had them up here, it's like they're empowered because they're above the horizon. These are things you can start to look at. You don't have to believe it, but this is stock film theory. In Juarez, or no, oh, I thought they were in Juarez, but whatever. Like, so this house where we see this scene, we see this kitchen, I would assume like this is his house, this is the kitchen. Yeah, it definitely is. We're going to be looking outside of these windows back in a minute. He's being oppressed by this landscape. is what's being shown in this establishing shot. So he's kind of like a product of the environment. You know, he's not above it. He's stuck in it and he's being oppressed by it. And on top of that, there's this fence. So he's just trapped. This family is trapped in this situation. And that's what this establishing shot to me reads as a film theory person. So here's a window in that scene. This window is our practical, essentially. It's lighting the ceiling. These fluorescents are off, though we can definitely see that this is going to be lit like by fluorescents, just like in her apartment. And presumably, this light is at the edge lighting her. There's hard sunlight coming in all the way through here, like that, all the way down here. Hard light hitting her finger. And presumably, that hard light is hitting the wall that's right here. And it's coming all the way in, bouncing and hitting her back. Now, likely there's actually a source over there, but that's the feel you're going for. And that's how you do natural lighting, is to light with, find where the direct light is hitting the scene, and then add that light source where you think the direct light is hitting. That's a very naturalistic way of lighting. Oh man, this scene's about the feels. Again, here's some hard light coming through the room. Some good example coming through that window like this, hitting him, hard light, and then what we can see in his skin, because he's pretty shiny, that's the reflection of the window, long reflection of the window, reflection of the window. And if I can explain really quickly what a Fresnel effect is, because I think I said it a couple times and people might be kind of interested, I'm just going to erase this away really quickly, is that if you see his hand here, you'll see that right there, there's very little reflection. That's because we're looking directly at it. Like if you're me, like, so you're the camera. When you're looking right at something, there's very little reflection. But as you go like this, like say that, look at the back of my hand. As you come straight at me, there's very little reflection in my hand for a couple reasons. But as I go like this, because it's at a glancing angle, you'll get a reflection of that window that's behind me. And that's called the Fresnel effect. And there's more to get into that. It's really important as you do 3D lighting, but you can see it in his arm here. Because that arm is turned away from us, because it's a glancing angle, you're going to get a reflection. Skin has the Fresnel effect on it. A lot of real world objects and textures have that. That's something that you want to pay attention to when you're lighting people, because people's skin are very Fresnel-y. So again, you'll see that this light from here, there's a little bit of direct bounce up here, but what you're really looking to do is introduce bright sources to reflect at glancing angles into skin. This is a bit advanced. Advanced things to look for in lighting, but you guys wanted Sicario. These are the things, the secrets that Roger Deakins and I would say Emmanuel Lubezki and certain cinematographers really rely on to light scenes. It's like you put one light source in the room and you let the Fresnel effect, you let backlight and reflections do the rest of it. And it's a subtle art to be able to do that. Like, look at the reflection in my desk. There's very little direct light on my desk, but it's being backlit by the window. Look at this. Look at the lighting on that back wall back there. That's a reflection, more or less, of the window. There is direct lighting. The lighting on the ceiling is a little bit more direct, but this is how masters of light. Everyone keeps calling Roger Deakins the master. This is the stuff that you're looking for. That's subtle in a scene, and you need to be able to pick up on as you're lighting scenes, and you want them to feel like this. And these are things that don't exist in a lot of student work and a lot of bad CG lighting, is that you don't let these natural effects light the scene, you just force it by adding lights. You're forcing these effects. You don't have to force this stuff if you do it correctly and you know what to look for. Man, this scene's sad. Sad stuff. Real spoilers at the end of this as well. So here's our light source that's coming through, direct light and reflection. The sunlight's coming through here, clearly hitting him hard on the face there, hitting him hard on the bed, and that's what's reflecting into his leg here. That's reflecting into, well, that's diffused lighting there. Really strong stuff. And then this is direct on the floor. And the gun and the doorway is reflective. That's a reflection, and most of this is reflected light. There's not a lot of direct, and even on that is reflected. So single light source coming back towards camera, reflective objects. And with the Fresnel effect, the more glancing you are at the object, so if you're looking straight at it, not that reflective. If you're looking at it like this, very reflective. Skin is like that. You'll see that in my forehead right now. Man, this scene's like the whole movie to me. Here's the window that we're looking out of. So that we're looking back out of this window. And this is where we kind of, or at least for me, this is when I really understood that he is a police officer. We kept flashing back to this, kind of like the movie Crash. Kept flashing back. It's like, who is this character? Why do I keep seeing you and your kids? You know, are you a bad guy? What's going on? This is where we see he's going to go play soccer or football with his kids. And this is where we see that he really is, oppressed by his environment. Your decisions have all led you here, where you're doing your job as a police officer, and he's being almost completely backlit by these lights here. There's some you can see a little bit of a low light source here, which presumably would be the guy's brake light. So wouldn't this light be red? I don't know, but there's clearly an up light going to him, giving this eye light. When you put the eye light on the bottom of the eye, here's an eye. If you put the eye light up here, it's kind of a happy scene. If you put the eye light down here, it's usually a sad scene. Again, more film theory, less film practice, more film theory. In this scene, clearly the eye light's on the bottom. This is called subsurface scattering, where you can see light passing through an object, and ears is where you typically see this being edge lit by the sirens. Very dark scene. He would be completely dark except for there's this low uplight coming at him. And then we get to this scene where we pull back, and presumably they're not really being lit by like the headlights of the car. But if you look at the angle of the light, if you look how low, the light source is actually down here. So it's almost like there's like a flashlight or big flashlight, but whatever. It's supposed to feel like the headlights of the car hitting him, even though there's only one shadow. He lets it go bright and overexposed, making it feel kind of raw, kind of like Cops or something like that. Bad episode of Cops. So this guy dies. Sad story. And then if you wanted to end this show by crying, just stare at this frame long enough, and maybe you'll get there. Yeah, as a father, it's a rough one. So here is the sun light coming through here, and we see the direct sunlight on the floor coming like that. This is a pretty broad source. This is likely actually like an 18K. It doesn't look like actual sunlight now that I'm looking at the angle. It's the first time that they've played this mirror in the shot. Kind of strong. It's a reflection of that, so that's adding bright objects to this wall. This is all reflection in this wood here, very glossy wood, reflection here, and we're at this down angle. Whereas before we've been at more or less level angles. We're level. We're above now. This is the end of the movie where the father dies. This is one of the last scenes where it's like, I think the social commentary comes in. We're at a high angle. There's a reason. There's a reason filmmakers go for the high angles. What is it? Maybe you guys tell me in the comment, why do you think this shot is at a high angle? What is that implying? If you've gone through film theory training, which I don't suggest you do, there's some stock reasons why you think you would do this, but I have my thoughts. Let me know in the comments why you think this shot's at a high angle. Why would you choose to do that? It's on purpose. It's really on purpose. Camera height is a massive decision when you're telling a story with a frame. It dictates the horizon, like I've kind of hinted at, and it dictates some other things. You guys let me know what you think that is. So that is Sicario. Thanks again, guys, for recommending this. I didn't watch it. I know it was up for best cinematography, but I don't watch all the movies necessarily, but this one was really good. I would say that this is one of the better movies I've seen of the whole year. And I don't have the link for it, but Vice did a documentary, I think, about the same subject, and they actually interviewed, and I know the guys at Vice, I know the guy that directed it. They interviewed the DP that actually went to Mexico and filmed basically the same subject, and then they both that DP who went to Mexico to do a real doc and Roger Deakins who did a narrative version of it on the same subject, they got to speak to each other. It was pretty strong. You guys can go look for that. I'm not going to link to it because I don't have it right now. I didn't remember that until just now, but I remember watching that. There's a lot of really cool filmmaking techniques in this, more than just the lighting. In the lighting, I think I've kind of given you a look into what is it about Roger Deakins' lighting that you find cinematic, and if I had to sum it up, it's about using a single light source, like a window, and then making sure that everything feels like that's the main light source, and really letting the characteristics of the materials in the scene carry the light even further. And a lot of the times that's reflections. And we talked a little bit about the Fresnel effect or the reflections. It's kind of a 3D thing that's a little bit more important in 3D because you get this stuff for free in the real world, but it's something that I think you should look into if you're serious about cinematography. If you want to take advantage of the things that Roger Deakins takes advantage of, I've exposed to you things that have taken me, honestly, took me 5 to 8 years to understand what was going on. It's more than just putting a light on something from the right angle. It's about the bounce light that happens. It's about the reflections that happen. And then knowing what those are and then working backwards and designing your shots to take advantage of that to have a certain effect. And that's what's kind of going on. And again, if you look at what's happening in my scene only, the reflection off the desk, the reflection of the wall, the practical coming through the room, I used a little bit of that here. It's nothing special. It's just the window, but it's about how I expose the scene down. I added a light in the same place. It's not exactly subtle. I wish I probably could have diffused that or something like that. But it's really understanding those things and using them to your advantage more than it is the fact that he's using an Alexa XT, using master primes. He's got a great color. I mean, big colorist is really helpful and like all this money, but it's like, in my opinion, this stuff is way more about taste and approach and design than it is more about the gear and that sort of thing. And I think that's what we like about Roger Deakins lighting is it's really more about the taste and taking a step back and lighting from that point of view versus just like destroying everything with light, which is how I work. I mean, I destroy things with light on commercial, that sort of thing. This type of lighting, if you're going for narrative stuff like that, will work and set the tone, but I sell a lot of products with commercial lighting, so that's really what I do quite a bit of. So that's going to wrap it up for this episode. Hope you guys liked it. Not a big focus on behind the scenes, more about the high level things about cinematography, and really, again, the things that we talked about here, you can do them with your iPhone. I almost guarantee you in the room that you're watching this video on. You could go look for these effects. Look for reflections on the desk. Look for reflections in walls. Put the window in the background, put a fluorescent in the background, put it out of focus. Let light come into the room. Where that light is the strongest, put a light source there and push it back. You're faking the fact that that light's going to bounce more into the scene because it typically doesn't. If you exposed for actual bounce light in a room, you'd blow out the background like crazy. So you're faking it. But that's the effect, big picture. We're talking big picture, high level stuff on Sicario today. So that's it for this episode. Let me know what movies you guys want me to break down. I want to do commercials, but the movies seem to be a little bit more popular, understandable. And if there's good B-roll, I will show you some technical mechanics of how they went about executing it. And if there's not, we'll probably revert back to this kind of high-level film theory breakdown of the cinematography. So thank you again for watching. Like the video. Go check out Modern Cinematographer. That was my call to action on this one. Modern Cinematographer, give it a Google. Give the last episode a listen. I think you'll like it if you're serious about cinematography. Put a lot of work into that one. I'll see you guys on the next episode. Bye.